Hello sew buddies, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is on how to make a simple bubu dress. This tutorial is very beginner friendly, and if you follow all the steps I showed here, you're on your way to giving the rich auntie vibes you've been dreaming of. If you're new here, hey my name is Joy and I'll be your tutor for this tutorial. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always coming back and welcome to my channel. If you're yet to subscribe, please do consider doing so, and as I bring you educational videos every week. Let's get right into the business for today. So yeah, you'll be needing your fabric, your strip. This is a black strip I'm using for the neckline, your thread, your tape measure, of course your scissors, your chalk, tailor's chalk. These are the measurements you'll be needing. The first thing you want to do is to fold your fabric into 4 parts. Here I'm using a 3 yards by 45 inches fabric, Ankara fabric. And when I folded this fabric, I realized that 3 yards was actually not enough, but I just decided to work with it because that's all I had available. So instead of folding it by the 45 length, I had to fold it the other way around. That's by the complete 3 yards. That's 36 by 3. I think that's 108 inches. So I folded it into 4. And the first thing you want to do is take your shoulder measurements, divide it by 2, and then you add your sleeve length. So here you see me, the shoulder measurements, I divided it by 2, that's 7.5, and then the sleeve length is 14. But because I was trying to manage my fabric, I just had to do a 13 inches instead, which is also fine by me. So for the neck, I took a 2.5 inches, and then for the depth of the neck, the width of the neck is 2.5, and the depth of the neck, I did a 2 inches. Now mind you, the front depth and the back neck depth will be different. I did a 2 inches, which is going to be the depth of the back, while my front depth, I took a 6-inch depth. So after that, the next thing you want to do is to cut out that neck, and after cutting out, you want to separate the 2 pieces. Here I'm cutting off the excess. This particular excess, I'm going to be using it to extend my length. The length of this dress is a 58 inches length, but after measuring it out, I realized that the length was not up to 58 inches. So I'm going to cut out these remaining parts of the width and then add it to my length. Here you see me, I'm trimming off the extreme so that the 4 pieces are equal. So let's go back to separating the 2 pieces. What you want to do next is trim off, cut out the what I'm doing here. Basically, I'm cutting out the, remember from our style, the front is divided, the center front is divided into 2. So I've just opened it up. I just took 1 piece. Mind you, I didn't cut the front and the back, the center front and the center back. I just picked the center front and I cut it off, divided it into 2. So yeah, I'm notching the side seam so that by the time I fold to take my neck depth in front, both sides will be matching and I won't have any distortion whatsoever. So yeah, I'm placing it down, and then for the parts where I slashed, that's the front part, I'm going to take my 6 inches depth. For the neck. So here I'm taking my 6 inches depth for the neck, and then I'll cut my neck like so. You can do a round neck, you can do a V neck, the choice is all yours. So yeah, I'm doing something that looks like a V neck but not exactly a V. After that, you want to open up, and then we start stitching. The first thing you want to do while stitching is to attach your bias strip on the neckline. So here you see me, I'm sewing in my bias strip. Note that this dress doesn't require any lining at all. So in order to finish up the neck part, you need something to use. Either you use the fabric or use a bias strip. Whatever you use is fine. So here you see me, I'm using a bias strip. The first thing, if you're a beginner, the first thing you want to do is to sew your bias on the front parts of this dress. That's the right side of the dress. Then to finish up, you turn it inwards and then you stitch. So here I'm turning it inwards so that the bias hides neatly inside the garment. After the neckline, remember I told you I was going to add to the length of this dress. So basically what I'm doing here is to make a French seam. Since I don't want to have too much weaving or too much interlocking, all I just want to do is to stitch the extra fabric to add to the length of my garment. So I'm sewing in a French seam instead of the normal seam we use. I'm just going to French seam this so it's nice and clean. After the French seam, that's after joining. Mind you might not require this step of joining, that's if your fabric is long enough. So the next thing I'm going to be going in to do is to stitch on that black strip, my black strip. Now what you want to do first is to come in 1 inch inside before you start stitching. The 1 inch is for half inch in the 1 inch is for your joining allowance to join to the other parts of the front piece, and then the remaining half inch is just part of the style. So you want to ensure you do that first. Now this is not a necessity. You can decide to make yours 2 inches, you can decide to make it as wide as, the choice is all yours. But yeah, what I am doing basically, I'm following that exact style you saw on the thumbnail. So what I'm doing basically is coming 1 inch and then I stitch on my strip. Now this strip is going to be going all around from one end of the below the front strip, round the neck onto the other parts of the front piece. I hope you understand. So it's just like a one piece. You start from the below one end of the front piece, round the neck, and then back down to the other end of the front piece. So after stitching the first side of the stripe, the velvet strip, the next thing you want to do is stitch the other part. Now just a quick observation, while I was doing this tutorial and I got to the point where I'll have to sew around the neck, I found out that, in fact, this is something I should have known or thought about. I found out just that I was fascinated by the velvet strip. I just loved it, but the downside of it is that it wasn't cut on bias. Bias cutting is usually done diagonally. So if this is done in the lengthwise grain or the crosswise grain, what it basically means is that when you are sewing it round any curve, there's going to be obstruction, like you're going to find it difficult to go around that curve because the natural grain of the strip wasn't cut in a diagonal pattern like a bias strip. So yeah, you can see here I found it very difficult. In fact, truth be told, at the end of my at the end of this tutorial, some parts of the neck were kind of squeezing. So what I did basically was to iron it out like thoroughly. I had to iron. Another trick I used to make sure it wasn't as bad as it should have been was that while sewing, I kept on pulling my strip and then pulling my strip, yes, and then relaxing the fabric so that I'll be able to maneuver the curved area. But what I'd advise is, while you're sewing this dress, if you want to make this bubu dress, please ensure that you're using a bias strip, which you can make yourself by cutting a fabric, any fabric of your choice, diagonally. by making your own bias binding, so it goes freely around the curve on the neck area. So yeah, the next thing I want to do is to now close up my front part. Basically, you could see I just marked where the limit where it will end. So I'm going to start from the neckline and then just stitch down to where I want my slits to start from, or my vent to start from. So that's what I'm doing here. We're almost done with this dress. This is a very simple, beginner friendly bubu dress. So the blue chalk right there is my limit. That's the limit, the place where I want to stop. I don't want to go beyond that line. After that, I'm going to go ahead and close up my hem. So because this is like an English mouth, I won't be double stitching the hem, and because I'm trying to manage the length as well, I don't want to reduce my length. Remember this, like I said from the beginning, this fabric was not big enough to give me my exact length, and I had to add something. So double folding my hem is going to reduce the length further, so that's why I'm just doing the single fold instead for my hem. But if you have enough fabric, believe you me, this will be very easy. To just be a straightforward stuff. So most of the steps that you see here are not even supposed to be included, but because I'm trying to work with the available fabric, I just had to do a whole lot of joining and calculation to help my clients. So the next thing you see me doing here is sealing up the side parts. That's where the sleeve, where the hand will be coming out from. So you just want to seal it up. You can actually use a bias strip to turn it around, but here you see me, I'm doing like a roll hem, a very tiny hem. I'm double folding actually, but then it's very, very tiny, like a roll hem. If you know what a roll hem is. A roll hem is basically just a tiny piece of hem you can use for curved area, like shirts, silk shirts, or what have you. Just something so tiny that won't reduce the length of your fabric to something tangible. So yeah, that's what I'm using, because of course I'm trying not to eat deep into the length of the sleeve. So I'm just going to use a tiny roll hem and then go right into the shaping of this garment. So yeah, you see what our finished look looks like, a finished dress. Although it's not completely finished, the next thing you want to do is to shape. Now, one thing to note while sewing a bubu dress, you don't want to shape to the exact size of your client or to the exact size of the person you're making the dress for. You always want to give an extra 2 inches seam on both sides. So yeah, the biggest part of her body is her hip. Sorry, it was not included in the measurement, but you need the measurement of the hip, and her hip was 40 inches. Now when you do 40 divided by 4, what it's going to give you is 10 inches, but instead of 10 I did a 12 inch, meaning I'm adding 2 extra inches to the side of the garment. So that 2 extra inches is to allow for ease, and also this is a free dress that is not holding or clinging closely to the person's body. So you just want to add an extra 2 inches. You can actually make it 1.5, you can make it 2.5, but I'll advise you keep the maximum size to say 3 inches. Why? Because you don't want it to look too bogus on your client. So for me, the limit is 1.5 to 3 inches extra allowance from the hip measurements. Now you want to use the hip measurement because it's for me, this hip measurement is the biggest horizontal measurement of my clients. If the bust measurement is the biggest horizontal measurement, then by all means please use the bust measurement, so that you don't end up using a lesser measurement and then it can't fit through the bigger measurements. I hope you get. For example, if your hip measurement is bigger and you ended up using your bust measurement for this calculation, you find out that when the person is wearing it, it's going to be so tight on the hip because there is not enough freedom at the hip area. So yeah, before I took it to the sewing machine, I had to stitch it to keep it in place. Then I started stitching along that line I had marked, the 12 inches line I had marked. So you just want to stitch. And before I also did the armhole measurement. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. For the armhole, I use a 13 inches. Now when you're sewing a bubu dress like this, you want to make the armhole bigger so that everything is just free. So instead of your regular 8-9 inches armhole, you want to go down as far down as 13 inches. So for this dress, I used a 13 inches for my armhole, and then for the width, I used 12 inches on both sides. That's 24 inches. So this is the last step of this tutorial. You just stitch the both sides, and then your dress is ready. Rich auntie vibes, awala. So yeah, you see what it looks like. A very simple, easy to sew dress. Very